Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kirishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, la'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah. Okay, here we are. Do I need to move that microphone closer, Orlando? You tell me. Again, without Orlando, none of this could be possible. So we're so grateful to him. And make sure that we give a little charity. Make sure we put a little charity in our charity box. Okay. So we have learned a lot. And we have studied a lot. And we've gone over a lot of the sea of Judaism. We haven't gone into a lot of depth, but we really traversed a lot of the surface to get an idea of Judaism. We talked about the Holocaust. We talked about Israel. Let's talk for a little bit what happens to Judaism in the 1960s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond to now. Behind me, there's a chart where we have Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, Renewal, Hasidic. Everything kind of ends up in the same place. What happens is in the 1950s and 60s, these two great rabbis, Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi of blessed memory and Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach of blessed memory, they start to promote Hasidic Judaism, but they do it through teachings and stories and songs, and starts becoming accessible to those people who may not be Orthodox. They may not be or observant at all. In the 1950s, really, we start getting a couple of things that happen in the Jewish world, mostly here in America, that are unique and really change the whole gestalt, the whole relationship with the world. We get Jewish camping, and we get Jewish community centers. So if you think about that time period historically of the 50s and 60s and 70s, you start getting into the hippie movement and the bebop movement and all these different types of things. Well, it happens in Judaism as well. We start adopting folk singing. We start adopting camp, and we start adopting Jewish community centers. And it changes the tone of Judaism, certainly in America. Let's start with camp. By the time you're in the 1950s, throughout the nation, you start having synagogues that own camps. There's summer camps, and you can go as children. Many of us grew up in the camping movement. It was about being proud that you're Jewish. It was about living a Jewish lifestyle. So the Jewish camping experience would be every day. The typical program you'd have, activities like archery and horseback riding, all the typical camp stuff. But you'd also have a theme for the session. You'd be studying. You'd have prayer services in the morning. You'd sing blessings before and after meals. You'd have prayer services in the evening. A Jewish theme for the whole session, whether it was 1 week, 2 weeks, or a month. And it was really a lot of fun. And for many of us, we grew up in that Jewish world. It was living Judaism. And the music that was sung was based on, remember, let's back up. We talked about Shlomo Carlebach a couple of weeks ago, how he took traditional verses and he put folk melodies to them. Well, that continues in the camping movement. You start getting guitar playing and song leaders, and it's just a lot of fun. And it really revitalizes young Judaism to a great extent. A woman who becomes very significant in that world is a woman named Debbie Friedman of blessed memory. Most synagogues, non-Orthodox synagogues, play her music, Reform and Conservative synagogues. She isn't able to get to do what she does without Rabbi Shlomo, but it becomes very folksy in the 60s and 70s, and camping becomes a big thing. And you develop friendships that last your whole life. Still to this day, many of my closest friendships are with guys that I went to camp with in the 70s and 80s. And so you have this camping movement that springs up. You also have this movement by the time you're in the 1950s called Jewish community centers, where Jews gather together and they play basketball, they do different things. And many of these Jewish community centers actually had summer camps as well. They started getting summer camps, but it was a place for the Jewish kids to go hang out. If they were from the city, they'd go hang out like a YMCA, but a Jewish community center, and they could be with each other and they'd meet each other, and there'd be dances and basketball and all sorts of things. In fact, one of the great stories is how Sandy Koufax learned how to play basketball at a JCC and almost did not become a baseball player because he so loved basketball, apparently. So that movement starts to open up Judaism. starts opening into the world and to the young people. Additionally, as we get into the 50s and 60s and into the 70s even, Israel now is this little tiny nation that keeps surviving, thank God. And they become heroes. And now we have Jewish heroes to look to. We have our own country. We're proud to be Jews. And at that time, anti-Semitism really doesn't show its head very much, at least not overtly, because people still feel guilty about the Holocaust and things like that. So you have Israel going on. You have people who are going for a summer to Israel, where they're making aliyah, they're immigrating to Israel. You have the camping movement going on. You have the Jewish community centers going on. And we have this new movement in Judaism. Remember, we had just Jews, and then we had Reform, and they called everyone else Orthodox, and then we had Conservative. And then we have another movement that's come in called Renewal. And it's really, it kind of organically springs up around Reb Zalman and Karl Bach, Rabbi Shlomo. And for lack of a better term, Renewal Judaism is Hasidic Judaism in English, or Hasidic Judaism light. It's like telling Hasidic stories, using melodies, some teachings, maybe a little Kabbalah, things like that. There are a series of books that are done that are opening that world up, opening Judaism up to the hippies, so to speak, of the 60s and 70s. The Jewish Handbook, the Jewish Yellow Pages, things like this. And Judaism becomes acceptable in that way to the young people. Aish Torah starts succeeding in Israel, people say, and expanding around the world, and certainly here in the United States, thank God, with Rav Weinberg. And Judaism starts to really have a lot of different facets going on through the 50s, 60s, and 70s. By the time you get into the 1980s, there's already a public relations movement to make Israel the bad guy. Now, let's be clear, Israel never started one conflict, they never started one war. That's the historical reality. But they start getting blamed. You have this whole world of the Palestinians being created to create a victim. There are public relations companies that say to the different Arab nations, you need to create a victim, and the whole Palestinian movement becomes big. There is no historical Palestine. Rashid Tlaib could say whatever she wants. There is no Palestine. There was Jordan. It was split in 1948, and for a brief moment there was a country called Palestine, but there is no historical Palestine. So by the time you get into the 80s, you start getting anti-Israel movements happening. It starts coming out a little bit. So all the anti-Semitism is now being couched as anti-Israel. You also have a big shift that happens by the time you get into the late 70s and early mid-80s, certainly in this nation, where you have an exodus of Jews from Iran. And that really starts happening in the 80s and in the 70s and 80s. And one of the things to understand about the influx of Persian Jews is that that community, if we remember our history, the Jews had been in Israel, and the first temple had been destroyed in the 6th century before the Common Era, and some had gone to Babylon. Some came back to Israel, but those Jews who were in Babylon, they stayed there for 2,500 years, until basically the 70s and 80s, and then were forced out and immigrated, many of them here to the United States. And so that kind of changes the dynamic of Judaism in this nation, certainly in the big cities where there's a Persian community. As we get through the 80s and 90s, anti-Semitism starts rearing its head even more clearly, not just anti-Israel, but anti-Jew. By the time we get into this millennia in the 2000s, you start having issues of people proposing that we should put yellow stars on products made in Israel, things like that. And now we're here in 2021, where anti-Semitism has become institutionalized. It is in the highest levels of our government and talked about with absolutely no shame. Josh Hawley, Senator Hawley, can say he wants to use his constitutionally protected right to question the Electoral College, whether you agree with it or disagree with it. And they try to censure him, etc. But Omar and Tlaib can make comments about Jews, just it's about the Benjamins, about the money, or whatever anti-Semitic trope they want to make. And they are not only not censured, but they are accepted by people like Pelosi and Schumer, and now Biden. And it is a sad state of affairs. the other thing that happens as we get to the end of the 20th century is we really start to assimilate. This happens throughout our history. We lose track of who we are. We decide we're smarter than Torah. Jews decide that they don't need to keep the Shabbat or keep kosher. They don't even need to take on one commandment in any way. They intermarry, and we start having more and more assimilation. And that goes on. And many Jews even become embarrassed to admit they're Jewish, or they make fun of the observant Jews. Whereas in the past, often someone who was secular would see an observant Jew and treat them with admiration. Sadly, it starts happening where people start treating them with a lack of respect. And so here we are today. We've traversed this journey of Judaism from creation through Talmud and Kabbalah, through meditation and Mussar, through the responses and the movements, through the kings and the prophets, through Moses, through the Torah, the Nevi'im, the prophets, the Ketuvim, the writings. All this amazing, amazing material, all these amazing teachers, all of which are designed so we can say, Hineni, I am present. So when God asks us, where are you? When anyone asks us, where are you? We can say, I am here, I am present. Ivri Anochi, I am a Jew. And things are challenging again in a way that I've never seen in my lifetime. But there's also a lot of hope. We are still here. We are surviving. The one movement, so to speak, that has grown in the last 25 years is the modern Orthodox, people becoming more observant, learning. I would say there's another movement that we don't discuss. It comes from a teaching of my friend and teacher, Rabbi Elijah Shochet, that I think there are a lot of people who are non-practicing Orthodox Jews. Their theology, their thinking is like an Orthodox Jew, an observant Jew, but they're not really observing all the mitzvahs, all the commandments. And there is such a plethora of information that we can find. There are some websites that I recommend. I try and avoid recommending websites, but there are two that I always can recommend to anyone. One is Torah.org, Torah.org. It has commentaries on the Torah portion, on prophets, just a brilliant resource composed from all sorts of different rabbis. And another one called Azamra.org, Azamra.org, which is the site, it means I will sing. It's the site from Rabbi Rama Greenbaum, an amazing site of source material and resources. So we can learn. Not only that, we have this internet. I'm not a big fan of the internet, I have to be honest. I'm not a big fan of social media. I'm not a big fan of that whole electronic world. I like to be one-on-one. I like to be with people in that connection. And there's nothing that can replace reading the actual Torah in front of you, or being there when someone does, davening with a friend, saying Kaddish with a community in person. But because of the internet, we now have the opportunity to study all over. You want to come to our Friday night service? You can watch it online. You could be in Florida, you could be in Germany and watch it online. You live in Los Angeles and you want to study with a certain rabbi in Israel, you can do it online. You want to learn about Hasidic thought and Breslov Hasidism and Kabbalah, you can go to Azamra.org. You can go to the classes. You can experience Eshat Torah. Any of these sites, any of these great organizations or individuals have these sites where you can study without even leaving your own home. And now we have to stay home. Although I don't know, I think the law changed this week. I get confused where we are, but we need to stay home. But whether we can go or leave, either way, the internet allows us to study with rabbis and teachers, to see how other people pray all over the world. And that's an amazing blessing. The world's become smaller. We can see how Judaism is practiced in Hong Kong or in India. I think India has the oldest synagogue in the world that is still standing and still being used. We can decide to see how Moroccans practice our religion, or Passover Seder in Portugal. It's all available to us. I'm a big fan of Sfarim, of books. I'm a big fan of looking for something through a book as opposed to searching it on the internet, partially because when I look through a book, I may find other information on the way to what I was looking for that I wasn't looking for, but I really love. The internet, you just point and click and you're there, but it is an amazing resource and it is here. And so we have an opportunity to really study and to learn, to experience. I think about how wonderful it would have been to possibly be at a concert with Shlomo Carlebach, or to go see different storytelling with Zalman or different people. You can find those videos online. You could go on YouTube right now, or Rumble, whichever one you prefer. And you could right now go find hundreds of videos of Shlomo Carlebach singing and telling stories. You can go on our website. You can go on our Facebook or YouTube channel and find dozens and dozens of videos, because I was kind of forced to do that. I was asked by the community to really start doing more of that, so we do. But of teachings, of stories, of services. We streamed our high holiday services where you can see Cantor Sam Glazer and myself. Every Friday night we stream. Cantor Benny and Matt and myself, and the people that are there. So there's a lot of opportunity, and there's a lot of darkness with the anti-Semitism, the assimilation. So what can we do about it? How can we make this world a better place than it was when we got here? I think one of the important pieces is to really explore authentic Judaism, to really explore Judaism, whatever part that is sung to you over this series of classes. If it was Kabbalah, if it was Mussar, if it was Talmud, to explore it in books, to explore it online. You can certainly email me if you're questioning is something a good source, not a good source. You can email rabbi@nersimcha.org, or events, they'll get it to me. But rabbi comes straight to me. And there's so much out there. There's such an opportunity. The other thing that happened at the end of the 20th century is, God bless the Bronfman family. They funded something called Birthright. Birthright is an opportunity for 16 to 26-year-olds to go to Israel for free, to explore our Holy Land with other people of their age and background. And everyone should send their children, their grandchildren on Birthright. People have said to me, Rabbi, what should I do? I've got a 17-year-old, I got a 15-year-old, I got a 14-year-old, I got a 12-year-old. What should I do to really get them involved in Judaism? My answer is typically not that they should go study. I think they should, it's great. But my answer is make sure they go on Birthright. Make sure they come to Jewish camps. Send your kids, your grandkids to Jewish camps. Campus Kramer, Swig, JCA Shalom, Brandeis, AJU, Brandeis Barton Institute, whatever it may be. Send your children and your grandchildren to camp. It's worth every investment. It's worth every dime that you spend. It really is. And most camps have camperships available. Most of the camps were closed last summer for obvious reasons, and I think many of them may be closed this year. I don't know if they know it yet, but send the kids to camp. They will learn what it means to live Jewishly. They'll learn what it means to have fun being Jewish. And that's a great way to teach Judaism. It really is. So as we come into this 21st century, our challenges are anti-Semitism that has become so prevalent. And it's just accepted. And our challenges are assimilation, and the two are obviously interwoven. What can we do? Educate our children. Number one, educate our children. In our synagogue, we don't charge for bar mitzvahs, bar bat mitzvahs, because I don't think that any family should have to determine, do we pay our car payment or do we pay for Jewish education? Tie yourself to a Jewish community. Whichever one, the great thing about Judaism is there's so many different ways of practicing it. Find a rabbi, find a community that sings to your heart, and then tie yourself to it. Rabbi Hillel in the Talmud says, do not separate oneself from the community. Tie yourself to that community. Give of your time, of your finances, give of your participation, and create those relationships. The Jewish community is extremely powerful. It is more important to give, to be part of a Jewish community than it is to make that donation for the hospital wing on a lot of levels, because a lot of people make the donation, but we need the Jewish community to keep ourselves alive, to keep our world alive, the Jewish world alive, to fight anti-Semitism, and to increase Jewish pride within each other, so that when someone asks, we're proud to say, yes, I'm a Jew. I observe the Sabbath, I observe Pesach, whatever it may be. I think that's an important piece tied to the Jewish community. Learn. Find a way of learning that works for you. If it's a book, there are lots of books. If it's online, there's lots of good online resources. If it's in person, find a place where you can study, where you can learn, where you can experience Judaism in a way that makes your heart sing. One of the really beautiful things about our tradition is it's not monolithic. And you may like this over at that temple and this over at that temple and this. I have a friend, wonderful man. He's a film director, directed shows. And I asked him what he was doing for Rosh Hashanah this past year. And he was so excited because so many synagogues were streaming their services. He was watching like 5 different services at the same time all around the world. Because he learns visually, he learns by watching it that way. Find a community, tie yourself to it, learn. And remember what we studied. Remember about the Yud, Hey, Vav, and Hey, the 4-letter name. Remember about Adam, that Eve doesn't come from the rib, but that's where they're tied together. Remember about the fact that the Big Bang is talked about in the first 2 lines of Torah. Remember the teachings of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Joseph and Moses and Joshua and all of the prophets. Remember David and Solomon and Saul. Remember these things. These are on video. You can go back and watch them again if you missed some or if you just want to recap. Learn about Talmud. As I have said over and over, when I was a young man, I thought Talmud was a waste of time and that it was meant for old men who had too much time on their hands. And I now believe it holds the secrets to the universe. Learn Talmud. Learn and experience Jewish meditation. We're going to start in March a series of classes that will be on Jewish meditation and mysticism. Learn. That's what sings to you. Learn about the halacha, the law. Study about the Middle Ages. Study about the disputations. All this stuff we've touched on. Think how much you've learned. Go and explore Jewish meditation and mysticism, or Mussar, or the Enlightenment. Explore the concepts that sing to you. Think about all that we have studied. I point over here because there's this big board that has all of our syllabus. You have it. The syllabus, I believe, is online, but all that's up there as well. Learn about Israel. Go visit Israel. Right now we can't, but make plans. My family made plans last May. We had to postpone them to November. We've postponed them again till May. B'ezrat Hashem, with God's help, we'll be there. Take on a little mitzvah. Take on something you haven't done. Decide, if nothing else, every week you're going to light candles. If that's too much, decide every week you're going to say Kiddush and have a glass of wine. Decide, okay, you don't want to keep kosher. Decide, you know what? I'm just going to cut out shellfish. Or I'm just not going to have milk and meat. Or if all that's too hard, just say, you know what? You're not going to have pork chops and ham and bacon. Explore. Take on Judaism one little step at a time. You don't have to take it all on. Take one little step. Take on a new mitzvah. Take on a new good deed. Visit the sick. Visit someone you don't even know who's sick. Volunteer at a hospital. Be part of the Jewish community. This is what's so incredibly important for us to survive. And our survival will determine the survival of the world. That's not meant to sound as arrogant as it is, but it is a truth. We are the ethics of the world, and we always have been. Our teachings are the ethical code of the world. And we need to show those teachings. Teach your children when they're staying at a hotel. No, you don't get to take that towel home. That would be theft. Learn and teach to be lifnei mishort hadin, before the line of the law. To to be a mensch, to do what's right and righteous. If all that's too tough, then just make a decision that when someone says, "How are you?" you don't have to say Baruch Hashem. Just make a commitment that when they say, "How are you?" you're going to say, "I'm great, thank God." Or "I'm well, thank God." Or "I'm having some challenges, thank God." Or whatever it may be, thank God. Thank God more often. Do it verbally, do it publicly. It will make a difference in your life and in the world. When it's Passover, tell your employer, "Look, I don't work on Passover." If they give you too much hassle, remind them that you legally don't need to. It's a religious holiday. Go to Rosh Hashanah, go to Yom Kippur and stay the whole day. Fast on Yom Kippur. Do whatever it may be. We've studied so much in the last number of weeks. I mean, we've been doing this now. We're in February. We started, I believe, in October. So we've been doing this 5 months each week. So much to explore. And this is just a taste. And most importantly, try to be kind and righteous. If you have the choice of doing something and you're not sure if it's righteous or not, don't do it. You have the choice of doing something that would benefit you in some way, but it's not kind, don't do it. Choose kindness. Choose righteousness. Make a choice to be Jewish, to embrace that and to live that. To realize, as we learned all the way back months ago, we are the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey. We are the letters of God's name. We are the image of God, and it is our blessing and our responsibility to walk that. All our studies, all of our rituals, all of our teachings, all of our ceremonies, all are designed so that we can be more present in our relationship with God. We can be more aware of everywhere God is. We can be more aware that we are spiritual beings having a physical experience and not physical beings who occasionally are spiritual. All that we do, all that we have, all this vast amount of knowledge is all designed so we can be in devakut, in cleaving with God. We can be yehud, we can be unified. I told the story earlier, and I think it's an important one, of the young man who at the age of 10 is able to go to college. He's so brilliant. And all the college students come to him and they say, "Oh, you're so brilliant. I'll give you $1 if you can show me where God is." And this wise young child says, "I'll give you $10 if you can show me where God isn't." Find God in the small places. Listen. God doesn't shout, God whispers. And act righteously. And in that process, we all need to find our tikkun olam. Tikkun olam is not a concept. It's an old concept. It is not. It does not mean what, unfortunately, it is taught in the way it's taught in so many different Reformed temples. Tikkun olam is the concept. It's not about social action. It has nothing to do with tikkun olam. Tikkun olam is the concept of reparation of the world. That each of us have a piece of repairing the world that only we can do. I can't do yours, and you can't do mine. It is as if we need to find an instrument, find the right instrument, and play the right note, the one note on that instrument. And if I'm supposed to be playing violin and you're supposed to be playing flute, it's not going to work when I try saxophone and you're trying cello. We need to find our instrument. We need to find that one note that is ours to play, our piece of repairing the world. And if we all can do that, if we all can really do that, do what God has put us here to do, be who we are meant to be, act with kindness and righteousness in accordance with the teachings of so many elders and so many teachings. And that truly becomes the sound of heaven on earth. And that becomes peace. So I hope this has been a good series for the last number of months. I hope you will join us as we do other series of classes. I hope you will be involved and come to our services. That you can always email me, you can email the temple. But that we you will be involved and stay involved both with us as a community and with other communities. Most importantly, I hope and pray that each of us really do experience what we are here to experience. We do what we're supposed to be doing. And so doing, bring peace to the world in a time when there's such horrible, polarizing chaos. Thank you for being good to me for all these weeks. I hope the class has been good for you. And I hope to see you soon, online or even in person if you're in Los Angeles. Thank you for coming to study, and may we all study in light and in beauty, and truly, truly help find and create peace in the world. Thank you, and shalom.